Hi, Suman.
Hi Divya.
Hey, we're a bit early. We can wait a few seconds.
Sure.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Yes, so am I. Very excited.
Yeah. So usually when we begin, you can do like a quick few seconds of context setting, as in why we want to talk about and this new channel, of course, and what you want to cover in this new channel, and then
Yeah.
today's topic might be great.
Okay.
Awesome. We can get started now, Suman. People will trail in slowly.
Sure.
So welcome to Mentza, and very excited for your new channel. I love the name. Nothing changes until you do, and I think the first topic is fascinating, Suman, about self mastery and with empathy. Being such a buzzword, I think I really am looking forward to see how you tie self mastery to it. But do you want to talk a little bit about your channel and what you're going to be covering in the weeks to come, and maybe then we can get started chatting about today's episode.
Sure. Sounds good. So I'm also very excited to start not just today's thing, but also a channel which is nothing changes until you do. For me, it's been a big transformative journey as well. And I've come to the realization that this is very true. That end of the day, it's very difficult to change others, but things start changing when we change ourselves. Um, so I'm going to talk about emotional intelligence, today and in the weeks going forward, because that's my area of passion and interest. And as I delve into it, I realize that emotional intelligence is a very broad term, and essentially it covers the entire facet of leadership, right? Because the leadership traits are, end of the day, highly interconnected and highly nuanced. We'll try to keep this as practical as possible. We'll have enough questions and answers. It'll link into. So I'm going to try and tie back everything into empathy, building relationships, building connects. How that all requires self awareness. And we could be in any topic, we could be touching upon on various things, right? Whether it's decision making, whether it's conflict, whether it's executive presence, all those different aspects of leadership which is there. I think we'll connect to those, and I think the Q&A is only going to make it richer. So with that, I want to jump right into the topic for today, which is why is self mastery a prerequisite for empathy and relationships? Divya, any questions in terms of the overall thing? Do you think that makes sense? What's your view?
No, it makes a lot of sense. I think looking forward to the journey, right? Because we all think about it, right? Suman, we keep saying we want to make time for a little bit of self awareness and a little bit of all of these things, right? But it
Right,
somehow
right.
slips. So I'm really,
Absolutely.
one of the reasons I'm looking forward to this is because it's that 20 minutes a week that you carve out to do some bit of
Yes.
reflection. So I'm actually.
Super. So the question we are trying to answer today is, why is self-mastery a prerequisite for empathy and relationships? Okay. Now, before we even answer that question, the question is, but why even empathy and relationships? Is it important? Now, my favorite thing is what I call the knowing doing gap. And I think I've spoken about this in various forums. It is not about knowing, right? Especially when it comes to, some of these things are very commonsensical. Probably you already know it. I'm not going to say something today which you have not heard of. It's not going to be earth shattering. The question is, you might know it, but you may not be doing it, and which is true for most of us. Human beings are very complex. We are very complex as people. I may be knowing, but I might not agree. Even if I agree, I may not be convinced. Even if I'm convinced, I may not be committed. So there could be a lot of gaps between knowing and doing. So today I'm going to focus, and I know these are short formats. So maybe today I'm just going to cover on the why. And again, the why question to me is the most interesting. The what and the how can always follow, right? So before we answer why is self-mastery prerequisite, let's try to answer, why is empathy and relationships important? Why do we need them in the first place? Well, if you go back in time in the good old days, I think we didn't need it. To be very simple, to be very kind of to the point, right? I mean, 20 years back, nobody talked about these things and was not required. um, Most companies used to follow what is called a carrot and stick approach, right? So carrot was about setting incentives, you give people promotions, and stick was much more common, right? So fear is a great motivator. You keep people under fear, and people do their jobs what they're supposed to do. Simple, right? But what has changed then? Why is this approach not working? And I think that's again goes to the title of my book, which is from command to empathy, which is basically command and control giving way to empathy. So I've always been fascinated as to what is changing today, right? And to me, I think a couple of things. One is we are moving into a creative economy. A creative economy is one which is more about heads rather than hands. Uh, so Gary Hamel came up with this framework where he talked of three types of economies, starting with the industrial economy, then we had the knowledge economy, and then the creative economy. Now, he also talked of the traits which are required in each of these economies, right? Um, See, for instance, it all starts with obedience, diligence, basic traits, which are very important for an industrial economy. Make sure you're coming in on time, make sure you're punching in your 8 or 9 hours or whatever is there, and people are happy, right? But the moment you get into a creative economy, the traits which are required are very different. It's about initiative, it's about creativity, it's about passion. And there is a fundamental distinction between these two types. While you can command the first set, you cannot command the next. You can command people to come in at 9 o'clock in the morning and punch in their hours, but it won't work if I command my team members saying, hey, you know what, come Monday morning, you better have creativity. It doesn't work because creativity is an emotion. It comes from within. It cannot be enforced from the top. And to me, this is the critical difference between what was the world yesterday and what is the world today. You can't command creativity. Yeah, those are emotions. Unfortunately, companies are still using the command and control, and it's not working. It is just not working. And in fact, I keep saying that it's interesting. When I wrote the book a few years back, it was a good to have. Today, suddenly everybody is talking of empathy, right? And I don't think companies are doing this for altruistic reasons. It's just that they're realizing that the command and control is not working, and they're not very sure as to what else will work. And all they know is that the attrition is skyrocketing. You've heard of the global exodus. It's happening worldwide. It's happening in India as well. In fact, the other day I was talking to this guy, and we were talking about attrition. And he said, hey, let me give you an example. You're talking numbers, percentages, but let me give you a real example. I said, okay, tell me. He said, we are a team of 10 people, and four of them quit, and three of them are down with COVID, and one is on vacation. So from a team of 10 people, I'm down to one person. He said, what numbers are you talking about? Right. And this is not a small company. This is a large multinational Fortune 500 company that I'm talking to. This is the reality that's happening today. The reasons why people are quitting are also very interesting. And I think the reason was there even earlier. The reason was very simple. People don't feel valued, or their work is not valued. And I think that has not changed. What has changed, in my view, is the employee's mindset, right? That they're not willing to put up with that anymore. Suddenly, thanks to the pandemic, it's given people a search for meaning. Yeah, Divya, you're right. Search for meaning, exactly. So the point is, if we need creativity in our organizations, not just compliance, right? Because we tend to focus on compliance. We need to build empathy and relationships. So that becomes our starting point. So let me take a pause here. Divya, does that make sense?
Absolutely does, Suman. And, I resonate a lot with a lot of what you're saying. But I want to bring in one other aspect, right?
Sure.
Especially your prompt for this circle, which said, why do we look outwards, right? And why not
Yeah.
inwards a lot of the time? And I love that prompt. And I think, if when we're moving towards that topic, one of the things that we look at in behavioral science, right, is this
Yeah.
whole
Yeah.
attribution bias, and
Yeah.
which purely simple means that I have insight into my emotions, my feelings, my motivations, my beliefs, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
therefore
Yeah.
I give myself a pass, right? But when another person, so for certain outcomes, like let's say I did not, I came late to work today and I gave myself a pass, right? but what I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
have
yeah.
is a view into the other person and why, and how they're motivated, how they're driven, and their context, right? And therefore I
Absolutely.
only judge them by their it should be their personality and nothing else, right? Because that's all I can
Mhm.
kind of attribute it to. and
Yeah.
and my my not question, but my wonderment is this, right, Suman, this is has always existed, right? This
Yes,
hasn't
yes,
it's
absolutely.
not new, right? So even though empathy and how the importance of empathy is new, this what do I call it, it's not self-absorption, but it's that one way street has always existed. And it has,
Mhm.
why has it become a lot more critical now, right? Why do you think again, self mastery or self awareness has become so much more critical?
Absolutely. So part of the reason is what I said. We are moving into a creative economy. Today, people have much more options. If they
Yes,
people
yes.
feel don't if they don't feel connected at work, if they don't feel connected to their leadership, if they feel that there is no purpose, they're going to leave, and that's exactly what's happening, right? So that is the reason companies need. It's a wake up call for companies, and I think the companies which are going to do well are the people who are able to bring in some of these concepts. Bring in the concept of respect, understanding, listening, taking care of their people. All the softer stuff which we tend to ignore is, I think, going to be hypercritical.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just taking a minute of that. Absolutely, that totally makes sense. Yes.
Right. So let's then jump into the next part, which is, why is self mastery important? Um, so you know what? We are always looking outward, and we are not looking inward. So the way I look at it is as a leader, if someone is there, everybody's running, right? Today, everybody's running, and it's almost like if somebody's running at 100 miles an hour, and you suddenly ask them, "Hey, you need to learn how to walk." So it's going to create a shock. So walk? What are you talking about? Here I'm running at 100 miles an hour and you're telling me to learn to walk? It is so counterintuitive, right? So to me, it is almost like that. If people are, constantly trying to change themselves, and when we tell the same people that, hey, you need to change yourself, it is that counterintuitive. But knowing yourself is absolutely critical to leading. And why just leading in organizations? Also growing as a person. And if you go back in time, if you go at a look at all our literature, look at famous personalities, they were all about self introspection and growth, right? So let me tell you a quick story. Being talking about self awareness. So last week I was in a session with some very senior people in a bank, and their manager, in fact, their skip level manager, 2 levels up, very senior person, he decided to come in and sit in. And he actually sat in, as an observer. He was actually participating, which was great. And so I had checked with him first. I said, "Hey, tell me one thing. All these people who work for you, what is their role?" So we've had a discussion. I said, "I'm going to throw that question open to the team." So when I asked the team, "Hey, what's your role?" Some of them said, "Our job is to get revenues, hit the targets, because that's what everything is all about. They have the certain targets for the bank." And I said, "Hey, but what if I told you that's not your job? You're managing people who are doing that." And the best part is their leader chimed in and he said, "Suman, let me just make a correction." And he looked at the team. He said, "You're not managing people who are who are getting business. You are managing people who are managing people who are managing people who are talking to customers and getting numbers. So you are 4 levels removed from what's happening in terms of actually getting the revenues." So don't kid yourself into thinking that you're the one who's getting the revenue. Yeah. So, and I think that's a great point that he's bringing up. In fact, when he said that, it was like a pin drop silence, in the room, and it was almost like a light bulb moment for people. um, what was he trying to say? He was trying to say that, look, your job is not to get numbers. Your job is to inspire, motivate, guide, coach the people, role model behaviors, make sure that people are inspired enough to come into work and get and chase those numbers, right? To me, it's also a good example of self-awareness, right? As leaders, and this is a question, in fact, Simon Sinek talks about in one of his videos. He said, I asked the same question to CEOs, and the CEO says that, look, my job is to keep customers happy. And I asked them, when was the last time you spoke to a customer? Right? I think it's pretty hard hitting. So the CEO's job is also to create an environment which is conducive to growth, right? Why I give this example is that what is your role is about self-awareness. Now, how many of us as leaders look at our role like that? Because, and to me, that's a paradigm shift in the way we're looking at things. The moment we realize that it's not about the number, it's about managing the people, inspiring them, guiding them, what have you. That's self-awareness. Okay. So, which is why self-awareness becomes a prerequisite. Now, we can delve more into it, and in order to do that, maybe we should revisit the EQ framework. Okay. But let me also stop here in the interest of time. We have 5 minutes left. So, Divya, over to you. Do we jump into this, or should we just open it up for Q&A, and maybe we can take this at a later point in time?
No, this the EQ framework sounds good, guys. Listeners, any thoughts, questions, provocation, anything, just type it into the chat, or if you see the join speakers button, you can just jump right in and chat with us, right? But Suman, let's jump into the EQ framework. It's fun.
Absolutely. Super, super.
Hey
So the
Uday.
EQ frame. Sorry, was there a comment?
No, Uday just jumped in. Uday, Suman,
Okay.
Uday is another channel host on Mentza. He runs multiple really cool channels. You should check it out. It's called 1 Minute Stories. He's
Awesome.
also a leadership coach and business storyteller. He's quite cool.
Divya,
Great,
too
great.
much. Hi,
Hi,
Suman.
Uday.
Very interesting
Hi, hi.
conversation. And I was just
Oh,
wondering
thank you so much.
because it was 4 minutes, and I was just thinking about this entire self mastery exercise, right? And one of the
Mm-hmm.
challenges that I find, both on the other end of the getting the um, both as a one who's a leader and also someone who
Mm-hmm.
also tries to get into coaching, the biggest challenge is not so much about awareness. I think somehow in the last couple of years, with so much of focus on individuals and vulnerability and coaching, the awareness bit of it has actually been scaled up. A lot of people
Okay.
seem to be self-aware, or at least are talking it. uh, the self-mastery and awareness, the biggest challenge most of us seem to be having is converting it to action. And when
Yeah,
that
yeah.
doesn't actually happen, there are two aspects to it. One is the opportunity is lost. There is also frustration because the individual knows he's not able to do it. And as a coach, there is only so much you can do. So I just wanted to have your thoughts on that.
That's a great question, Uday. So my view is I tend to pin everything down to self-awareness, and I'll tell you why. Um, I think, again, going back to my knowing doing gap, it's very easy to know, but extremely hard to do. And I think this goes to this concept of mindfulness, right? Now, often we are in automatic mode, right? We are not able to think in the You mentioned the word in the moment, right? It all starts with reflection, because learning happens when we reflect. I think learning is more in reflection than action. So I think it starts with building a habit of reflection, maybe end of the day reflecting of how the day went or how the meeting went. As we do that, we get better, right? Because at least there is an awareness of what is going wrong. Because end of the day, I think we're only trying to be a better self of ourselves, right? Better version of ourselves. um, as we get more aware, what happens is it becomes in the moment. It almost becomes real time, and real time to me is mindfulness, right? So let's say I'm in a conversation, to be able to not just have a conversation with to you, but also be kind of watching myself to see, how do I need to change how do I need to calibrate myself? How do I need to mirror emotions? All that requires a lot of self-awareness, right? Um, what am I about to say? Do I need to say it? Should I be the person who says it? Is this the right time to say it? So there are multiple aspects to it. And I think all of this kind of tie back into the self-awareness, and it's not easy, and I think it's a lifelong journey. There's a beautiful quote which
Yeah.
says, uh, most people grow old before they grow wise. And I think wise is about all of this, where it becomes second nature. So yeah, and it requires tremendous amount of practice, and over time you keep getting better. There is never an end point, but we are all on that journey. I hope I'm able to kind of address part of the question that you asked.
No, no. I mean that is very important, and I'm completely cognizant of the fact that the question that I asked uh, will not have the greatest of answers, because all of us, in the sense that it never happened, because you hit on the nail when you're talking about the knowing doing gap, right?
Right, right.
And
Yeah, it is a big one. Yeah.
and for me, what you said really makes sense, because if you're not doing, that means you're not knowing enough, or maybe
Mm,
not knowing the right things that are triggering you. And that's where we are stuck in always. This has been a
absolutely.
fantastic. conversation. It's a
Super,
great
super.
start.
So, Divya, this is the first time I'm doing it. Says 30 less than 30 seconds left. So I'm assuming we'll drop off at the end of it. So very
Yes.
quickly for the listeners, maybe what we can do is, Uday, you bring in a great point. You talked of fundamental attribution bias. Maybe we can cover that. Maybe going forward, we'll link it to the EQ framework. I'll talk a bit more on mindfulness and why it's important for relationships. Make sense?
Works.
That will be, yeah, awesome. Thank you so
Awesome.
much. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks to all the listeners for listening in.